Hello everyone and welcome back yet again to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. I hope you liked our only fantasy hockey segment of the day, but now we are going to transition to the player profiles. But before we do, I want to remind you guys yet again that if you do feel so inclined, please consider leaving a tip or donation at the link gsmc.cloud. It is a huge support to both me, my fellow podcasters, and ultimately the network as a whole, so anything you leave is greatly appreciated. But let's stay on the screen and head into our next segment, our first wide receiver player profile of the day. And it is a guy who many fantasy players really love just because, like I said before, he's the picture of consistency. His records will stand the test of time, 10 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. When all is said and done, this guy, in my humble opinion at the very least, is a first ballot Hall of Famer down there in Tampa Bay. We are, of course, talking about the great Mike Evans. Now, the thing I love about Mike Evans is not just his consistency, but his ability to elevate any quarterback or receiver room. What he did with Baker Mayfield last year in a situation where Baker was really trying to find his footing with one specific team and not try and bounce around the NFL like every other journeyman quarterback is truly incredible to watch, because that tandem truly became very special, because it cemented the fact that Mike Evans isn't going anywhere anytime soon, no matter how much he ages, no matter where he might wind up, if his contract winds down. He's always going to be a superstar in this league. And I'm going to have a lot of troubles finding caveats to break down here. Without further ado, let's jump right into why Mike Evans is such a pivotal player in fantasy terms. Throughout his career, he's accumulated 1,743 fantasy points. His best total was actually in 2016 with 298.1 points. Actually, 208. My confusion there. He was the wide receiver 4 last year. He averaged 14.4 points per game in terms of PPR leagues. He was a wide receiver 8 in PPR there. Last year, just to prove his mettle at the wide receiver position, I looked at his stats, and they told the story completely. He had 79 catches for an impressive 1,205 yards, 15.9 yards per reception, and a whopping 13 TDs. So as you can see, he quickly became one of Baker's go-to targets, as he should be in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers system. The fantasy odds are projecting him to have another solid year, not as fantastic as years past, but still, by his lofty standards, a very incredible season, an above average season for any wide receiver of Mike Evans' caliber. 1,125 yards, 8 touchdowns for a total of 164.6 fantasy points they are projecting for Mike Evans' season next year. And so, when I look at Mike Evans, I really see no flaws with why people might have skepticism drafting him in fantasy drafts, especially in 8-round drafts or even PPR drafts, because he gets you a lot of value. He's a guy who has to share a lot of targets with different players. We saw it last year as Baker Mayfield tried to look other options ways, but Mike Evans remains the guy who really holds this Tampa Bay offense together because of his ability to truly elevate those around him. And so, I'm not necessarily worried about Mike Evans in the slightest right now, because I know that Baker Mayfield trusts him now. Last year was truly testing the waters with them, seeing how Baker fit into the system. Now that Baker's in his second season in Tampa Bay, he'll feel more comfortable, he'll feel more developed in the system, and Mike Evans will still be there. Now, if I were to nitpick a little bit about Mike Evans, it won't necessarily be anything about him. I truly believe it's down to the Buccaneers offense. I think now that Baker Mayfield has a system, he loves play action. And when you're a quarterback who loves play action, a lot more options become available to you. We saw last year that Baker got a little bit more comfortable playing within the pocket, but ultimately, I feel like in order for Baker Mayfield to truly feel comfortable, more play action needs to be incorporated into whatever system he goes, because his best season was in 2020 when he went to the divisional round under Kevin Stefanski due to their switch to getting him outside the pocket and creating plays out of structure there. The way that this affects Mike Evans is because in terms of play action, the leading wide receiver might not be the go-to target because of the fact that when you're in play action, the structure falls to the wayside. You can improvise a lot more with play action. Baker Mayfield is one of the best improvisational quarterbacks in the league. He can make something out of nothing. I truly think that it's the best way to get his full potential, like I said. And looking at what the Bucs have outside of Mike Evans, they have solid running back depth now. They have Rashad White. They have, a solid wide receiver core on it. Mike Godwin, David Moore also got incorporated more into the system. So they have a lot of pieces to really hurt you should this offense revert to more of a style that best fits Baker Mayfield. And so, yes, Mike Evans will still be a prominent figure in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, but at what cost is the question, because let's say you're in a PPR league and you're in the second or third round of your draft and you're looking at guys at the top end of the market. You're looking at guys like Tyreek Hill. You're looking at guys like Stephon Diggs, who I'm going to talk about a little bit later. You're looking at newer guys, maybe like a Puka Nacua, who I'll also talk about later, or a Nico Collins, who I talked about before. And you want a guy who is going to be solidified in how much target share he's going to get, because that's very important in terms of PPR, because no target share means no volume of targets, and no targets means no receptions, and so on and so forth. If you're banking on what I'm saying in terms of the Bucs potentially switching to a more play-action oriented offense, a lot more RPOs as well, then I think that's where you may have some skepticism in choosing Mike Evans as potentially your wide receiver 1 or 2. However, always remember that there's been no receiver to have done what Mike Evans has done. And it's also with a myriad number of quarterbacks. He didn't just do it with Tom Brady. He didn't do it with, really solid receiving cores all the time. You remember Jameis Winston was throwing him the ball early on in his career. And so it's truly a testament that a wide receiver can be talked about so highly, mainly due for his proficiency on and off the field as an emotional leader. But that's what he is. And Mike Evans, when all is said and done, is going to look back on his career and say that's one of the best in NFL history. And whether or not this season can prove that point, whether or not, the Tampa Bay Bucs are looking towards new horizons, I don't necessarily think will taint his reputation. But if we're talking about the 24-25 season, I just think the wide receiver market right now is so scatterbrained, because on the one hand, you have reliable receivers you want to draft, but on the other hand, you have guys who you're kind of testing the waters on. You have guys who are still young, who you don't know whether or not they'll pan out. You have mid-level wide receiver 2s who could potentially have great seasons. And there are also more positions that are going to be placed in a premium as well. It's not just the wide receiver market. It's going to be running backs. It's going to be tight ends. And so where Mike Evans falls into all of this truly is going to be an enigma in the coming months, because when I look at him, I see no reason as why he'll slip to, say, the 4th or 5th round. I think he's a solid 3rd to 4th round option at the wide receiver position in 8-round drafts. Now, there are other receivers who, while similar to Mike Evans, definitely don't have the intelligence of Mike Evans. And here's what I mean by that. When I say Mike Evans elevates those around him, I'm not just meaning the players on the field, the players on the offense. I mean he elevates the whole organization. I think that if you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over the past 10 years, there's been a lot of volatility in how they built. You had guys come and go. You had Tom Brady come in for that one season. You had guys like Gronk come in for that one season. But the one constant that remained is Mike Evans. And for some fantasy players, that's enough to say, hey, look what this guy has done. Even without the stats, the fact that his longevity and the fact that the organization really appreciates what he's doing gives me faith that no matter what, he's going to put up solid fantasy numbers. So, I basically told you that Mike Evans, in terms of leadership, in terms of emotionality, in terms of longevity, in terms of pure stats, truly is someone who should always be in the wide receiver one conversation. However, it is a very feisty, cute running wide receiver market that is going to be seen in fantasy drafts, and you definitely have to decide if Mike Evans is still in that conversation. We'll have to see when the season plays out, especially how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense is going to operate, but I truly think that Mike Evans is one of the standard bearers at the wide receiver position. But that should just about do it for this segment of today's show. Coming next, we'll be talking about, like I said before, Stephon Diggs. In a new home in Houston, can he be a catalyst in the wide receiver market? Can he be someone to force the issue as well? We'll be right back to discuss him on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC